years ago. And I wrote down the title in my Bible, and some years later I was like, I remember that sermon was a good sermon. But all I had was the title. I didn't have any notes or anything. So like every good preacher, you have a title and you go find a text, and so that's what I did. And I came to Luke chapter number 6. This is the title, so it's not my title, it's his. Give what you want. Give what you want. Luke chapter 6, verse 37 and 38. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. Condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye mete withal, it shall be measured to you again. The beginning of that in Luke chapter 6, verse 37, those first two words are perhaps the most misquoted words in the entire scripture record. Judge not. How many times has somebody hurled that at your head at a Thanksgiving dinner or at some family discussion or some discussion at work? Who are you to judge? That is not what this passage says, or the equivalent passage in Matthew chapter number 7. It doesn't say don't judge. What he says is, when you judge, you will be judged the same way that you judge someone else. So, if I judge you with leniency, when it's my turn to be judged, I'll be judged with leniency. If I judge you harshly, then when it's my turn to be judged, I'll be judged harshly. Understanding that, let me read that to you again, and you'll see this now. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. All right, if I don't judge at all, then nobody's going to judge me. I don't have people out there. And ye shall not be condemned. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. So if I forgive, what am I going to get back? Forgiveness. Give, and it shall be given unto you. So whatever I'm doing is what I get back. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give unto your bosom. For with the same measure that ye mete, the word mete there means measure, with the same measure that ye mete withal, it shall be measured to you again. If I treat people with rudeness, I'm going to get to the place where that's the only way people treat me. If I treat people if I'm very hasty in my judgments, very hasty in my estimation of them, I'm going to get to the place where people are very hasty with me and they don't want to hear context and they don't want to hear background and they just rush to judgment because I'm going to get back what it is that I give. From this thought that people generally give back to you what you give to them comes the title. Give what you want. If you want kindness, then give kindness. If you want patience, give patience. If you want understanding, give understanding. If you want love, give love. If you want friendship, give friendship. So with that by way of introduction, let me give you 4 statements tonight, and I'll not keep you long. Number 1, it's not right to want what you won't give. It's not right for me to want you to treat me with kindness, but I won't give you that same kindness. It's not right for me to desire that you treat me very lovingly, but I'm not treating you lovingly. Marriage, of course, is a classic example of this. The statement goes, happy wife, happy life. So I want a happy wife. So if I want a happy wife, well, that's a problem because my general tendency, my default approach is to be grouchy. Added to which I have a disease that makes me grouchy, and I have a beard that makes me look grouchy. I was at Lowe's a couple of years ago, and I was having a bad day, and I was leaning on the paint counter there, and a guy came up, and he stood next to me, and he gave one look at me, and he said, "You look like you need a beer." Apparently, I just have this grouchy demeanor, this angry look, as if everything is always going wrong. I cannot give that sort of an attitude to my wife and then expect her to be bubbly and cheerful. I think one of the most important verses, Jesse, I hope you listen to this, one of the most important verses to learn as you first get married is 1 Corinthians 10:25. Whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake. When you get home, don't ask your wife, what is this, some kind of surprise? What are you trying to do to me here? Yeah, now you know better. I mean, the thought passes your mind. It's dinner time, and she puts it on the plate, and you're thinking to yourself, I was on a missions trip to Zimbabwe and ate better than this. Right? Those are the thoughts that are going through your head. Are you trying to kill me? I didn't actually pay the life insurance this year, in case you wanted to know. But here's the thing. If I dish out, and I'm being snarky, but if I dish out, if I'm serious in saying those sorts of things in a cutting sort of a way, then why in the world would I ever expect my wife to say on a Sunday on the way home from church, wow, honey, that was a tremendous message. Everybody was so convicted. That was just phenomenal. If I'm going to treat what she offers me with criticism, why would I expect to get back compliments? If I want compliments, what should I give? Compliments. It's not rocket science. It isn't fair to expect her to give me compliments when all I give her is grief. Number one, it's not right to want what you won't give. Number two, it is right to give what you don't get. It is right to give what you don't get. You say, now wait a minute, you just said it isn't right to want what you won't give. I know. Well, then why is it right for someone else to want some good thing from me that they don't give to me? It's not right for them to want something good from you that they don't give to you first. But it's right for you to give it to them anyway. When I'm on the receiving end of this, I should expect that I'm going to get back the same treatment that I have given other people. But when I'm on the giving end of that treatment, I should not justify to myself a nasty spirit, a belligerent attitude, a harshness, an unkindness, a coldness, a cruelness. I should not justify that on the basis of, well, that's how they've treated me. Now, they should expect it, but I shouldn't justify my nastiness toward them with the fact that they were nasty first. What makes Christianity unique is that it rises above the normal, average human approach. When I was in elementary school, it was, I'll like you if you'll like me. I'll be your friend if you'll be my friend. But we learned differently in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus said in Matthew chapter number 5, you have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. If you knock out my tooth, I'm taking one of yours. That's human nature, right? If you hit me, I'm going to hit you back. If you attack me, I'm going to attack you back so hard you'll never attack me ever again, right? That's just that's how we're programmed from infancy. It's in us. It's our old nature. But Jesus goes on to say, "But I say unto you that ye resist not evil. Whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the." All right. So if somebody verbally hits me, people don't walk around smacking me, but they oftentimes will say things. Now, if I have started it, if I have started this particular verbal war, I have no right to whine about the fact that it's coming back to me. But now, if I didn't start it, if I've been good and what I'm getting back is bad, well, I'm still supposed to be good. If any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. Whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. I don't know the ladies who graced this platform a moment ago and uttered those so interesting sounding noises. I don't know their children, but I highly suspect that their children look like them. That's just the way it goes. You have a stunningly handsome man and a gorgeously beautiful woman, and then out of that comes our three children. That's just how it happens. Thank you for that, Jesse. I appreciate that very much. That was supposed to be funny. Nobody else was laughing. Jesus said, this is what your heavenly Father is like. You think for a moment about all the grief that God gets. You think you've gotten grief? You've not seen all the grief hurled at God. What did he do to cause all of that? Was he nasty? Was he brutal? Was he mean? Was he terrible? Did he set out to inflict the human race with himself and torture them to death? All God has ever been is good and loving and kind. What does Paul say in the book of Romans? The goodness of God leadeth thee to repentance. God's so good. but yet he's treated so badly by so many people. But what does he continue to be? Good. I'm supposed to be like my father. I should resemble my father. If you met my father, you would see we resemble each other. Honestly, our hair is similar. Actually, he's got more than I do at this point. He was a pastor. I'm a pastor. Our body shapes resemble each other. We think alike in so many ways. It's not difficult at all for you to see me standing next to my dad, or even compare my life to my dad's life. My dad's idea of a wonderful afternoon is to build a fire and turn on some classical music. That's what I did this afternoon. I built the fire last night, but turned on some music and read some books. My life resembles his. That's a conscious choice on my part. I wanted a peaceful life like what my dad has, but you would expect me to be like my father. Well, if God is our Father, Jesus' point is, then your life should resemble God's. And in the context, what he's saying there is, when you are treated unkindly, you don't justify your unkindness in return by saying that's how I was treated. Instead, you're like God, and you give back the good that you didn't get that you wanted in the first place. It's Christ-like. You say it's not fair. There's nothing fair about the cross, is there? Not a single thing. The big symbol of Christianity is the cross. Usually I would step aside at this point and point backward in our church auditorium, but I dasn't here. There's this amazing red curtain. Did you get my picture in front of this red curtain yet? I gave you one job, city worker, one job. By the way, you do such a good job. Yes. All right, so what did I say, number one? I already forgot. It's not right to want what you won't give. Number two, it is right to give what you don't get. Number three, if you give what you don't get, eventually you will get what you do give. If you give what you don't get, eventually you'll get what you do give. If you get grief, but you return blessing, eventually you'll get blessing back. Solomon said it this way in Proverbs 25, if thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. Well, I want him to starve. Give him bread to eat. And if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head. That sounds like what I want to do. Light him on fire. No, the idea of that is that your goodness will be something that eats away at the inside of him. As a father, it's fallen to me as a father to do most of the discipline in our home. Not the reproof, but when it comes to the actual discipline of the spanking part of things, I did most of that. And as a father, I did not have a problem spanking my children when they were, for lack of a better word, rebellious. When they were hard, when they knew exactly what they were supposed to do and they just defied me, I'm like, okay. All right, now you're going to get it. But what I found hard is, and I think you men in the room will understand, I found it hard to discipline a small child who was already repentant. They'd been caught, they'd been reproved, they needed to be disciplined, it was part of this process, but they were already weeping tears, and it wasn't tears of terror, it was tears of genuine contrition. It's very hard to be hard on someone who's already repentant. When hatred and love meet, love eventually wins. That's what God shows us. When he was nailed to the cross, it was hatred that drove those nails, and not those Roman soldiers hated him, but the system that nailed him to the cross hated him for what he said, hated him for what he did, hated him for what he represented, hated him for what they presumed him to be. They were afraid of him. It was hatred that drove him to the cross. And how did he win? He won by loving. That's how he won. When hatred and love meet, love wins. When harshness and kindness meet, kindness wins. I know that none of you men here have ever have a bad day at work, but I occasionally have a bad day at work. If I have a bad day at work and I come home and I don't manage to leave that outside the door, I bring it inside there with me. it only takes one little thing to like set me off. It's like I'm dynamite and all I need is just a spark. I'm having a tough day at work. I don't leave it outside the door before I come in. I walk in. Mandy doesn't read the fact I'm having a tough day, and she says, "Hey, our debit card got declined today because you didn't balance the checkbook." Well, if you wouldn't have spent so much money, the debit card wouldn't have been declined. Now, how's that evening going to go at that point? Badly, right? On the other hand, if when I walked in the door with my bad attitude, my wife says, "I can tell you've had a rough day. Here, sit down in the easy chair and let me feed you some peeled grapes." How's that evening going to go? Much better. In fact, probably how I'm going to react while I'm eating those peeled grapes is I'm going to say, "Honey, I feel so much better. How about let's go to the mall and buy some shoes?" Why? Because I didn't start out that way, but I was handed that graciousness, I was handed that kindness, I was handed that love, I was handed that affection, and I could not help but respond with the same thing. You say, "Okay, Pastor Brennan, but that only works in sermon illustrations." Except Solomon goes on to say in this verse, "Thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head." Oh, this is worth you coming for tonight. Well, no, the meal is worth you coming for. This is almost worth coming for. "Thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee." Solomon didn't say, "You'll treat that unkind person with kindness, and they will reward you with kindness." That's not what he said. He said, "You'll treat that unkind person with kindness, and who's going to reward you?" Who would you like to have owe you? I don't want the guy who's bankrupt to owe me money. I don't want the guy who's always skating on the edge. You know, his car's 4 different colors, and he lives in a room that's 4 feet wide and 7 feet long, and he sleeps on a cot, and he can barely hold a job down. I don't want him to owe me. The guy I want to owe me is the guy who has his house paid off on the edge of town and it's worth $1 million. That's the guy I want to owe me. If you could pick anybody in the whole world to owe you something, don't we always joke and say, "Yeah, I discovered Bill Gates was my long-lost uncle," right? Just found somebody rich. We've all wanted to find somebody in our family who was rich. I keep looking. It's never happened. But how? This verse tells me how I can get God to owe me. If someone treats me nasty and I give them back grace and kindness, I would argue that eventually they will not be able to deal with that, and kindness will win, and you will eventually get that back. But regardless of whether that ever happens or not, what you will discover is that God is paying attention, and God looks down at you and he says, "Now there's somebody who's being like my son Jesus, and I want to bless that kind of a person." When I'm given grief and I return blessing, one of 2 very good things is eventually going to happen. I'm going to change the heart and actions of the one who grieves me, or I'm going to make God indebted to me for a blessing. It's not right to want what you won't give. It is right to give what you don't get. If you give what you don't get, eventually you'll get what you do give, which brings me to my last thought. So, give what you want. I've always wanted as a pastor to have a peaceful church. My father's a pastor. He pastored for 38 years. Still alive. He's 84. My mother's 83. My dad stopped pastoring about 13 years ago, retired from pastoring. And I actually spent more time with him after he retired. He came and preached in our church for a month every year, and we had a wonderful time. But I saw my dad go through 2 very bad church splits, one when I was 16 and one when I was about 30. I paid attention to both of them because when I was 16, I already knew I wanted to be a pastor, and when I was 30, I was pastoring. I paid attention to both of them. And one of the things I learned from that is the great priority there is on peace in a church. David said in Psalm 23, he said, when he talked about growth, Psalm 23 is the progression of a lamb that grows, and a lamb needs to gain 100 pounds in the first 100 days of its life, a pound a day. But the only way that lamb can do that is if where it eats is peaceful. I want to be beside the still waters, right? Peaceful. Christians grow best in peaceful environments. When you have a church that's at peace, you can often develop growing Christians. So I've wanted a peaceful church all my life, and God has given me, the vast majority of the time, a peaceful church. I haven't had a church split yet. Might have one this Sunday, I don't know. But I haven't had one yet in 28 years. Had a few splinters, but that's not exactly the same thing. God's given us a peaceful church over these years. But now, wait a minute. I have no right as a pastor to want to get love from my people and affection from my people and gratitude from my people and respect from my people and blessing from my people, and yet I treat them like Joseph Stalin treated the Soviet Union. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I want them to give me that, then I need to be a gracious pastor. I need to be a kind pastor. I need to be a loving pastor. I need to be a patient pastor. If that's what I want, then that's what I need to give. Now, you could take this the wrong way, and you could use it to go manipulate somebody, and I don't believe that's biblical. We're not supposed to try to simply elicit things from people. Our goal is to be like Jesus Christ. But what we will discover in being like Jesus Christ, when you're a good Christian, other people around you respond entirely differently over time. You give them enough time. Some of you that have worked secular work for years, you know what that's like. When you first walked in there and they discovered you were a Christian, they mocked you. But they don't mock you anymore. Now what they do is they come to you when they need prayer. Right? Because they've watched your Christian life long enough, they don't mock you anymore. Instead, they need you. What kind of treatment do you want from your husband? I mentioned this. My wife and I did a marriage conference just last week in Pennsylvania, and I mentioned this story. A doorbell rang one day in Chicago, and we pastored for 16 years in Chicago before we came to Iowa. Doorbell rang one day, and I was at home. I went to the door, and there was a lady from our church standing there at the door. She'd been part of our church for probably 6 or 7, 8 years, something like that. And her husband, I discipled her husband, baptized her husband, tried to counsel them through some things. She's standing there, very distraught look on her face. I don't know how to describe this other than just say she was not a pleasant woman. She was a very domineering woman, a very highly difficult to get along with. She stood there. She looked at me and she called her husband's name. She said, "He left." She didn't mean that he went to the store. She meant he walked away from their marriage. I knew instinctively what she meant. And she reached out and she handed me the note that he left her that morning on the dresser. Now, I won't tell you the rest of the conversation, but I will tell you the first thought that went through my head. I didn't tell her this, but the first thought that went through my head was, what took him so long? Isn't that terrible? She was that spirit of a woman. It didn't surprise me at all that he left. What do you want from your wife? Then give her that. Well, she doesn't praise me the way she should. So when's the last time you praised her? She does something worth praising, I will. That street runs both ways, doesn't it? Give what you want. A pastor friend of mine, we were talking the other day about marriage, and he gave me a very beautiful thought. He said, his name is Matthew Barber. He said, I think we would be helped if we remember that husband means farmer or gardener. A gardener is gentle and patient with his plants. He knows they're fragile. He's more concerned with well-nourished roots than immediate fruit. He certainly doesn't beat the plant into submission. He gives it what it needs and allows nature to take its course. If we lovingly nurtured our wives and gave support and protection and encouragement as we ought, God would work in them in ways we could never coerce. You're not going to grow Iowa State Fair winning tomatoes by going out there and stomping on the tomato plants. Are you? No, you're going to plant the right ones in the right soil. You're going to water it correct. You're going to support it well. You're going to prune it well. You're going to treat that thing like it's your favorite child. And then it's going to bear fruit. If I cherish my wife, that's a fantastic word. If I cherish my wife, she will respond with goodness. If I brutalize her, she will respond with fury. Well, you fight fire with fire. I don't want my marriage to be a forest fire. You don't fight fire with water. You fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. I want my marriage to flourish. Then I must husband her. I must husband her. Give